The war room fell silent as Captain Jackson Riley finished reading the intelligence report. Earth's final defensive line had fallen 3 hours ago. The Vorthak Empire's massive war fleet now hung in space just beyond Luna's orbit, their crimson ships blotting out the stars like drops of blood against the void. Admiral Chen's voice cut through the tension like a blade. 48 hours, maybe less, before they begin orbital bombardment, the Admiral said, his weathered face grim. Every major city, every military installation, every human settlement will be ash within a week. Jackson set down the report, his jaw clenched. Around the table, humanity's brightest military minds sat in defeated silence. 30 years of interstellar war had led to this moment, and they had no answers left. The Vorthak Empire was simply too powerful, their technology too advanced, their numbers too overwhelming. There has to be something, General Torres muttered, running her hands through graying hair. Some weakness we haven't exploited, some strategy we haven't tried. We've tried everything, replied Dr. Helena Voss, the expedition's lead xenobiologist. Conventional warfare, guerrilla tactics, biological weapons, computer viruses. Nothing works against their adaptive shields and regenerative hull technology. Jackson had been quiet throughout the briefing, but now he leaned forward. What about their culture, their rituals? We've been fighting them for 3 decades, but how much do we actually understand about what makes them tick? Dr. Voss raised an eyebrow. You want to try anthropology when their plasma cannons are aimed at our planet? I'm serious, Jackson insisted. Every species has traditions, beliefs, customs that matter more than pure military might. The Vorthak Empire isn't just a war machine, it's a civilization. There might be something in their cultural practices that could give us leverage. The room erupted in skeptical murmurs, but Admiral Chen held up a hand for silence. What exactly are you suggesting, Captain? Jackson stood and activated the holographic display, showing images of Vorthak society gathered over years of intelligence operations. Look at their political structure. It's not just an empire, it's a matriarchy ruled by an empress who's been in power for over 3 centuries. According to our cultural analysts, she's not just a political leader, she's considered a living goddess by her people. Empress Zytha Corvanis, Dr. Voss added. Our xenoanthropology team has studied her for years. She's ruthless, brilliant, and absolutely devoted to expanding Vorthak dominance throughout the galaxy. But she's also bound by ancient traditions, Jackson continued. Their society is built on ritual, ceremony, and sacred bonds. I've been studying reports of something called soul bonding in their historical texts. It's an ancient practice where 2 beings link their life forces permanently. General Torres scoffed. And you think their empress is going to hold hands and sing campfire songs with us? I think, Jackson said quietly, that she might consider a soul bond with a human representative as the ultimate gesture of peace. According to Vorthak tradition, once 2 beings are soul bonded, they cannot bring harm to each other's people. It's considered the most sacred form of alliance possible. The room fell silent again as the implications sank in. Dr. Voss was the first to speak. Jackson, the limited information we have on soul bonding suggests it's incredibly dangerous. The ritual literally links 2 beings at the cellular level. If something goes wrong, I'll die, Jackson finished. But if we do nothing, everyone dies. At least this way there's a chance. Admiral Chen studied the young captain with calculating eyes. Jackson Riley had been one of their best pilots before transitioning to strategic planning, known for his innovative thinking and willingness to take impossible risks. Even if this soul-bonding ritual is real, what makes you think the Empress would agree to it? Because she's practical, Jackson replied. The Vorthak Empire has been fighting us for 30 years. They've won, but at enormous cost. Billions of their people have died, entire fleets destroyed, resources depleted. If I can offer her a way to claim victory without further losses, while gaining something unique, she might be interested. And what would she be gaining? Torres asked. Jackson's expression grew determined. The first human soul bond in recorded history. Think about what that represents, the cultural significance. She wouldn't just be conquering humanity, she'd be absorbing us into her empire through the most sacred ritual possible. Dr. Voss pulled up additional files on her tablet. There's another factor. According to our intelligence, there's political pressure within the Vorthak Empire to end this war. Not everyone supports the massive resources being spent on conquering one small planet. A ritual bonding could be presented as a diplomatic victory rather than a military one. The debate continued for hours, but gradually the desperate plan began to take shape. It was insane, unprecedented, and probably suicidal. It was also their only chance. 3 days later, Jackson found himself aboard a small diplomatic shuttle, approaching the massive Vorthak flagship Dominator of Worlds. The ship was a masterpiece of alien engineering, its curved hull stretching for kilometers, covered in bioluminescent patterns that pulsed like a living heartbeat. Weapon systems, capable of cracking planets, bristled along its length. As the shuttle docked, Jackson felt his heart pounding against his ribs. He'd volunteered for this mission knowing full well he might not survive the next few hours. But the weight of Earth's fate pressed down on him like gravity itself. The Vorthak escort that met him was intimidating but polite. They were tall, elegant, beings with pale blue skin and angular features, their movements graceful despite their obvious physical strength. They led him through corridors that seemed grown rather than built, walls curving in organic patterns that hurt his eyes to follow. The Empress's throne room was vast and shadowy, lit by floating orbs that cast shifting patterns of light and darkness. And there, seated on a throne that seemed carved from a single massive crystal, was Empress Zytha Corvanus herself. Jackson had seen images of her before, but nothing had prepared him for her presence in person. She was breathtakingly beautiful, in an utterly alien way, her skin like polished marble, her silver hair cascading over shoulders that seemed too delicate to carry the weight of an empire, but her eyes, violet and ancient, held depths that spoke of centuries of power and knowledge. "So," she said, her voice carrying musical tones that resonated in his chest. "The humans send me a captain to propose soul bonding. How fascinating." Jackson forced himself to stand straight, meeting her gaze despite the urge to look away. "Your Majesty, I come not as conqueror or conquered, but as someone seeking to forge a bond that transcends the boundaries between our peoples." Empress Zytha rose from her throne, descending the crystal steps with fluid grace. As she approached, Jackson caught the scent of something like starlight and winter air, distinctly alien yet intoxicating. "You understand what you're proposing?" "Human?" she asked, circling him slowly. "Soul bonding is not a treaty or alliance. It is the literal joining of two life forces. Once completed, we will be connected at the deepest possible level. Your emotions will be mine. Your pain will be mine. Your very life force will be intertwined with mine. I understand the risks, Your Majesty." She stopped directly in front of him, close enough that he could see flecks of silver in her violet eyes. "Do you? The ritual will link us permanently. There is no divorce, no separation, no escape. If you die, I die. If I die, you die. We will share thoughts, emotions, even physical sensations. Is your species truly prepared for such intimacy with their former enemy?" Jackson felt heat rising in his cheeks but kept his voice steady. "I'm prepared to do whatever is necessary to save my people." Something flickered in the Empress's expression, gone too quickly to interpret. "And what do you offer me in return for this unprecedented alliance?" "Myself," Jackson replied simply. "My knowledge, my loyalty, my life force. But more than that, you gain the first human soul bond in history. Your empire would have achieved something no conqueror ever has, binding an entire species through sacred ritual rather than force." Empress Zytha was quiet for a long moment, studying him with those ancient eyes. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer. "You're either very brave or very foolish, Captain Jackson Riley." "Probably both, Your Majesty." For the first time since he'd entered the throne room, she smiled. It transformed her face completely, making her seem younger despite her centuries of age. "I find that combination intriguing." "Very well, human, I accept your proposal. We will perform the soul bonding ritual." As her guards began preparing the ceremonial chamber, Jackson felt a mixture of relief and terror. He'd succeeded in the first part of his impossible mission. Now came the truly dangerous part, binding his soul to an alien empress who held the power of life and death over his entire species. The ritual chamber was unlike anything Jackson had ever seen. The walls pulsed with bioluminescent veins, and the air itself seemed to hum with energy. Ancient symbols covered every surface, shifting and changing as he watched. In the center of the room stood a raised platform surrounded by crystalline formations that sang with harmonic frequencies. The soul-bonding ritual has not been performed for over 2 centuries, Empress Zitha explained as she led him to the platform. She had changed from her formal robes into something that resembled liquid starlight, the fabric clinging to her curves in ways that made Jackson's breath catch. It requires absolute trust, complete surrender of one's individual identity to the bond. They stood facing each other on the platform as Vorthak priests began chanting in their ancient language. The crystals around them began to glow brighter, resonating with energies that made Jackson's skin tingle. "Give me your hands," the Empress commanded softly. Jackson reached out, his human hands looking rough and primitive against her elegant alien fingers. The moment their skin touched, electricity shot through his nervous system. He gasped, staggering slightly, but she held him steady. "The bond is already beginning," she whispered, her voice seeming to come from inside his own mind. "Can you feel it?" He could. Something was awakening between them, a connection that went deeper than physical touch. As the ritual continued, Jackson began to sense her emotions, her thoughts brushing against his consciousness like whispers in a foreign language. The chanting reached a crescendo, and the crystals blazed with blinding light. Power surged through the platform, through their joined hands, through every cell in Jackson's body. He felt himself dissolving, his individual consciousness merging with something vast and ancient and feminine. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the light faded. Jackson collapsed to his knees, gasping for air that tasted different, felt different in his lungs. Beside him, Empress Zitha swayed, but remained standing, her violet eyes now holding flecks of brown that matched his own. "It is done," she said, but her voice echoed strangely in his mind. "We are bound, Captain Riley, soul to soul, life to life, until death parts us from this existence." As the implications of what they'd just done began to sink in, Jackson realized his impossible gambit had worked. The war between their peoples was over. But looking into the Empress's eyes, seeing his own reflection there, he understood that his real journey was just beginning. The soul bond pulsed between them like a living thing, and with it came the terrifying knowledge that their lives, their hearts, and their very souls were now irrevocably intertwined. The first thing Jackson noticed when he woke up was that he wasn't alone in his own mind anymore. Fragments of alien thoughts drifted through his consciousness like whispers in a language he shouldn't understand, but somehow did. He sat up in the luxurious quarters that had been prepared for him aboard the Vorthak flagship, pressing his palms against his temples as waves of unfamiliar emotions washed over him. Somewhere in the ship, Empress Zitha was experiencing the same disorientation. He could feel her presence like a warm pulse in his chest, her confusion mixing with his own. The soul bond had worked exactly as promised, perhaps too well. A soft chime announced a visitor, and Jackson looked up to see the Empress herself entering his quarters. She moved with her usual grace, but he could sense the tension beneath her composed exterior. Her violet eyes, now flecked with brown that matched his own, studied him with an intensity that made his heart race. "You feel it too," she said, her musical voice carrying notes of vulnerability he'd never heard before. "The connection is stronger than expected," Jackson nodded, rising to his feet. "It's like having another person's dreams playing in the background of my thoughts. Is this normal for soul bonding?" "I don't know," Zitha admitted, moving to the large viewport that showed the stars wheeling past. "The last recorded soul bonding in our history was 3 centuries ago, and the records are incomplete. But this intensity, this constant awareness of each other." She paused, her elegant fingers pressing against the transparent aluminum. "I can feel your pulse, Jackson. Your heartbeat is echoing in my chest." The use of his first name sent a shiver through him, and he saw her shoulders tense as she felt his reaction through their bond. This was going to take some getting used to. The political situation is stabilizing, she continued, clearly trying to focus on practical matters. My High Council has accepted the Soul Bond as a legitimate alliance. Your Earth is safe from further military action. And your people? How are they handling having a human soul bonded to their Empress? Zitha turned from the viewport, and Jackson caught his breath at the complex emotions playing across her alien features. There is resistance. High Chancellor Morvek believes I've compromised the Empire's purity by bonding with an inferior species. Others see it as a sign of weakness, that their goddess Empress needed to merge with a human to maintain power. Jackson stepped closer, drawn by an impulse he couldn't entirely explain. And what do you see it as? For a moment, her carefully maintained composure cracked. I see it as the most frightening thing I've done in 3 centuries of existence. You're in my mind, Jackson. Every thought, every memory, every carefully guarded secret is now accessible to you. Do you understand what that means for someone who has ruled through mystery and untouchable authority? He could feel her fear through the bond, raw and honest in a way that made his chest tighten. Without thinking, he reached out and took her hand. The contact sent electricity through both of them, and he heard her sharp intake of breath. I understand that you're not as alone anymore, he said quietly. Neither of us is. The days that followed established a strange new routine. Jackson found himself given unprecedented access to the inner workings of the Vorthak Empire. As the Empress's soul-bonded partner, he was technically her equal in rank, though the reality was far more complicated. He attended high council meetings where ancient alien nobles debated policy in languages that the bond allowed him to understand. He walked through sections of the massive ship that no human had ever seen, learning about technologies that were centuries ahead of Earth's capabilities. But it was the private moments that affected him most deeply. The bond seemed to grow stronger each day, connecting them in ways that went far beyond the political alliance they'd originally intended. When Zitha experienced the stress of ruling an empire, Jackson felt it as tension in his own shoulders. When he missed the simple pleasures of Earth, the taste of coffee, the warmth of sunlight, the sound of rain, she experienced those sensations as bittersweet longing. One evening, as they shared a meal in her private dining chamber, the intimacy of their connection became impossible to ignore. Zitha had been unusually quiet, picking at food that her alien physiology required but clearly not enjoying. You're homesick, she said suddenly, looking up from her barely touched plate. I can feel it like an ache in my chest. You miss your world. Jackson set down his utensils, studying her face in the soft light of floating bioluminescent orbs. I miss some things about Earth, but I'm not regretting my choice if that's what you're worried about. Aren't you? Her voice carried a note of something that might have been hope. You gave up everything for your species, your career, your freedom, your chance at a normal life with someone of your own kind. Did I? He leaned back in his chair, considering her question. Or did I gain something I never expected to find? The Empress's elegant eyebrows rose in surprise. What do you mean? Jackson struggled to put his feelings into words. This bond between us, it's not just political anymore. At least not for me. I can feel your loneliness, Zitha. 3 centuries of ruling alone, of being worshipped but never truly known. You've been carrying the weight of an entire civilization on your shoulders, and you've never had anyone to share that burden with. Her composure finally cracked completely. Tears that looked like liquid starlight began to flow down her pale cheeks. You don't understand what you're saying. I'm not some lonely female looking for companionship. I'm an empress, a living goddess, to my people. I've conquered worlds, ordered the deaths of billions. My hands are stained with the blood of countless species. And you've also preserved Vorthak civilization for 3 centuries, Jackson replied gently. You've kept your people united, strong, and proud. You've made the difficult decisions that no one else could make. That takes incredible strength and sacrifice. He rose from his chair and moved around the table to kneel beside her seat. The position should have felt submissive, but somehow it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Through this bond, I've felt your memories, your experiences. You didn't enjoy the conquest and bloodshed. You did what you believed was necessary to protect your people. There's a difference. Seetha's violet eyes met his, and for the first time since he'd known her, she looked truly vulnerable. The bond is changing me, Jackson. I find myself questioning decisions I've made, seeing situations through your human perspective. Is this what your people call love? This overwhelming need to be close to someone, to share everything with them. That night, as they lay together in the vast bed that dominated her sleeping chamber, they explored the intimacy that their failing bond still allowed. Their lovemaking was desperate and tender, charged with the knowledge that it might be among their last times together. Every touch was amplified by their psychic connection, every caress shared between both their consciousness. "I never expected to fall in love," Zitha whispered afterward, her head resting on Jackson's chest as he stroked her silver hair. "In 3 centuries of existence, I never allowed myself that vulnerability." "And now?" he asked, feeling her heartbeat against his skin, knowing that his own heart was beating in perfect synchronization through their bond. "Now I understand why the ancient texts spoke of true bonding as the ultimate expression of love. To surrender yourself completely to another, being to become something greater than the sum of your individual parts." She lifted her head to look at him. "Are you prepared for that level of intimacy?" Jackson met her gaze, seeing his own reflection in her violet eyes, now permanently changed by their connection. "I gave up my individual existence the moment I volunteered for the original soul bond. If we're going to do this, we might as well do it completely." The next morning brought disturbing news. High Chancellor Morvek had been building support among the Vorthak nobility for breaking the bond by force if necessary. He argued that preserving their empress's life was worth risking renewed conflict with humanity. "He's planning a coup," Zitha explained as they met with Dr. Voss and a small group of loyal allies. Her voice was weaker than the day before, and Jackson could feel her life force flickering like a candle in wind. "If we're going to attempt the true bonding, it has to be today." "The ritual chamber is prepared," reported Captain Thiss, one of Zitha's most trusted military commanders. "But Morvek's supporters have been asking questions. We may not have much time." Dr. Voss looked between them with obvious concern. "Are you both absolutely certain about this? Once the true bonding begins, there's no stopping it. You'll either succeed and become something unprecedented, or you'll die in the attempt." Jackson and Zitha exchanged a look that carried the weight of their shared experiences, their growing love and their desperate hope for a future together. "We're certain," they said simultaneously, their voices harmonizing in a way that made everyone present shiver with recognition of their deepening connection. The true bonding ritual chamber was similar to the one where they'd first performed their soul bond, but the energy here was different. Ancient, primal, and dangerous. The crystalline formations around the central platform hummed with frequencies that seemed to resonate in their bones. As they took their positions, Jackson could feel Zitha's fear mixing with his own. But beneath the fear was something stronger. Absolute trust, complete love, and the willingness to risk everything for the possibility of a shared future. The Vorthak priests began their chanting, but this time the words seemed to come from the walls themselves, as if the ship's bio-neural systems were participating in the ritual. The crystals blazed with light that was almost too bright to look at directly. "Whatever happens," Zitha said, her voice already taking on the ethereal quality that meant the ritual was beginning, "I want you to know that loving you has been the most real thing I've experienced in 3 centuries, and you've shown me what it means to be truly alive," Jackson replied, feeling the boundaries of his individual consciousness beginning to dissolve. The power surge when it came was unlike anything from their first bonding. This wasn't a connection between 2 separate beings. It was a complete fusion at every level. Jackson felt his memories merging with Zitha's centuries of experience, his human emotions blending with her alien perspectives, his individual identity dissolving into something larger and more complex. For a terrifying moment he thought they were dying, their separate selves being consumed by the ritual's power. But then he realized the truth. They weren't dying. They were being reborn as something entirely new. When the light faded and the chanting stopped, 2 figures stood on the platform, but they were no longer quite the same beings who had entered the chamber. They looked the same physically, but their eyes held depths that spoke of shared consciousness, combined wisdom, and love that transcended individual existence. "We are," Jackson began. "We are one," Zitha finished, but both voices carried harmonics of the other, creating a sound that was neither fully human nor fully Vorthak. Dr. Voss ran her scanners over them, her expression shifting from concern to amazement. The energy readings are off the charts, but they're stable. More than stable, they're actually generating power rather than consuming it. Through their new shared consciousness, they could feel the truth of her words. The true bonding hadn't just saved their lives. It had transformed them into something that could sustain itself indefinitely. They were no longer two beings sharing a connection. They were one consciousness experiencing existence through two bodies. High Chancellor Morveck's attempted coup collapsed when word of the successful true bonding spread throughout the ship. The nobles who had supported him found themselves faced with something unprecedented. An empress who had literally transcended her individual existence for love, creating a bond that was stronger than any political alliance. In the weeks that followed as they learned to navigate their new existence, Jackson and Zitha discovered that their transformation had implications far beyond their personal relationship. Their combined consciousness held insights that neither species had possessed. Alone, human creativity and adaptability merged with Vorthak wisdom and technology, creating possibilities that neither civilization had imagined. The peace between their peoples evolved from a political necessity into a genuine partnership, guided by leaders who understood both sides intimately because they were both sides. Through their shared consciousness, they could serve as perfect translators, mediators, and bridges between two very different ways of thinking. Standing together on the observation deck of their flagship, looking out at the stars that had once been a battlefield, they felt complete in a way that neither had ever experienced as individuals. "Do you regret it?" Zitha asked, though she already knew the answer through their shared thoughts. "How can I regret becoming more than I ever dreamed?" "Possible?" Jackson replied, his arm around her waist as they watched human and Vorthak ships flying in formation together. They had saved their peoples, transformed themselves, and discovered a love that literally rewrote the laws of consciousness. Their individual lives had ended in that ritual chamber, but what emerged was something greater, stronger, and more beautiful than either could have achieved alone. The war was over, the peace was secure, and the stars themselves seemed to shine, brighter in celebration of what two beings could accomplish when they loved deeply enough to surrender everything for each other. In the end, humanity's greatest victory wasn't achieved through superior weapons or brilliant tactics, but through one man's willingness to give up his individual existence for love, and in doing so, he and his alien empress had created something that would guide both their species toward a future neither could have reached alone. They were no longer Captain Jackson Riley and Empress Zitha Corvanus. They were something new, something unprecedented, something that proved love could indeed transcend any boundary the universe might impose. They were truly one, and they were eternal.